In the town of Ashwood Hollow, where the road bent twice before it found the church steeple, there stood a forge that had not gone cold in 60 years. Wood smoke and coal dust hung faintly over that stretch of Main Street every morning, so familiar to the townsfolk that most had stopped noticing it decades ago. The man who kept the fire burning was named Walter Kesler, and nobody in town, not even the neighbors who had known him his entire life, knew he would leave behind $3,100,000 when he finally closed his eyes for the last time. In the town of Ashwood Hollow, where the road bent twice before it found the church steeple, there stood a forge that had not gone cold in 60 years. Wood smoke and coal dust hung faintly over that stretch of Main Street every morning, so familiar to the townsfolk that most had stopped noticing it decades ago. The man who kept the fire burning was named Walter Kesler, and nobody in town, not even the neighbors who had known him his entire life, knew he would leave behind $3,100,000 when he finally closed his eyes for the last time. It happened on a slow Tuesday in 1965. Walter had just been paid, and he was bragging about a tip he'd heard. Some mining stock a traveling salesman swore would triple by spring. Otto set down his tongs and looked at the boy the way he looked at a bent horseshoe, like he could still be saved if handled right. Speculation is for men who enjoy losing money slowly, Otto said. Ownership is for men who can wait. He walked Walter to the back room, where a cigar box held statements from a broad stock market fund, the kind that simply bought a small piece of hundreds of companies at once and left them alone. Otto had been feeding it a portion of every paycheck since the fund first opened its doors. He told Walter that the secret was not cleverness. The secret was decades and the discipline to not touch it. Walter opened his own account that winter with $22, all he had left after rent. He kept feeding it, a little from every job, a little from every horseshoe and gate hinge and wrought iron fence he built with his own two hands. It became a private ritual, one he never spoke of. Every Friday, after the shop closed and the fire banged down to embers, he would sit at the small desk in the back room and write the same number into a ledger, then walk it to the bank on Monday morning before the doors even opened, as if the money might. He told no one. Not the men at the diner, who talked endlessly about horses and hunting leases and the occasional lottery ticket. Not the pastor, who assumed the young blacksmith simply lived modestly out of necessity. Not even Eleanor, the school teacher he married 3 years later in a small ceremony behind the church that cost less than 1 month of his contributions. Eleanor knew only that her husband was careful with money in a way that sometimes embarrassed her at church socials when other wives arrived in new dresses and Walter still wore his father's mended coat. She did not know the coat was a choice, not a limitation. He'd change his mind if he waited too long. The 1987 crash arrived like a hailstorm out of a clear sky. Walter watched the newspaper headlines scream about the worst single day the market had ever seen, and he felt his stomach drop the way it did when a piece of hot iron slipped from the tongs. Eleanor found him standing at the kitchen table that night, staring at a statement that had lost nearly a quarter of its value in an afternoon. Otto's voice came back to him, worn and steady as an old anvil. The market does not remember Tuesdays, only decades. Walter didn't sell a single share. He kept buying. He and Eleanor had a son, Daniel, who grew up smelling of coal smoke and loving none of it. As a boy, Daniel would sit on an overturned bucket in the corner of the forge, doing his arithmetic homework while sparks arced overhead, dreaming not of hammers and horseshoes, but of tall buildings he had only seen in magazines. Walter watched his son's eyes and understood, the way Otto must once have understood him, that some people are simply built for a different fire. Daniel wanted the city, wanted a tie and an office, and Walter never once tried to talk him out of it. Instead, on Daniel's 18th birthday, Walter opened an account in his son's name and made one deposit, quiet and unannounced, then told him it was his to grow however he saw fit, or ignore entirely, and never mentioned it again. By the time the year 2000 arrived, Walter's account had grown into something he rarely allowed himself to look at, a number climbing steadily past the reach of any blacksmith's salary. Then, the dot-com collapse tore through the market, like rust through untreated steel, and again the number fell. And again, Walter kept his hands on the bellows instead of the phone. He had learned by then that panic was simply another kind of speculation, dressed up as caution. In 2003, a girl named Priya Anand wandered into his shop after school, fascinated by the sparks flying off his grinding wheel. Her parents ran the gas station on the highway and had immigrated years earlier, chasing a series of business ideas that never quite took hold, each one draining a little more of the family's savings than the last. Priya had grown up watching Hope curdle into worry at the kitchen table more nights than she could count. She started sweeping Walter's floor for a few dollars a week, then holding metal for him while he hammered. Then finally, at 16, working up the courage to ask if he would teach her the trade properly, the way Otto had once taught him. Walter said yes, on one condition. She had to let him teach her something else too, something that had nothing to do with iron. He handed her the same explanation Otto had once given him, updated only by the decades between them. Small amounts every month into a fund that owned pieces of the whole wide market instead of a single company. He told her that most people lost money trying to be clever and quietly grew wealthy by simply being patient. Priya, who had grown up watching her parents chase get-rich schemes that never worked, listened harder than anyone ever had. The 2008 crash hit while Priya was finishing trade school, and this time it was Walter who nearly wavered. He was older, his hands slower, and the number on the statement fell by nearly half in a matter of months. He drove to the cemetery where Otto had been buried a decade earlier and sat by the headstone for an hour, saying nothing out loud, but hearing everything the old man had ever told him. Every warning about clever men and their clever losses. The wind was cold that afternoon, and somewhere behind him, a church bell rang the hour, and Walter realized he had outlived nearly everyone who might have talked him out of staying the course. He went home and kept buying, a little every month, exactly as he had for 43 years. Eleanor passed quietly in her sleep in 2011, and Walter grieved the only way he knew, by working. Daniel had grown into a successful architect in the city, still unaware of the small deposit his father had made 2 decades earlier, which had since multiplied into a modest fortune of his own without a single additional dollar added. Priya took over more and more of the forge's daily work, and Walter, well into his 70s now, spent his mornings teaching and his afternoons simply watching her hands find the same confidence his once had. The pandemic crash of 2020 arrived like nothing Walter had witnessed before, sudden and violent, wiping away more value in weeks than the '87 crash had in months. Priya, now managing her own small savings alongside the forge, called him in a panic, certain the world itself might not recover. Walter told her the same 6 words Otto had once told him. "The market does not remember Tuesdays." She held on. By the following spring, both of their accounts had not only recovered, but grown far beyond where they had started. Walter Kesler died on a quiet Thursday morning. In March, at 86 years old, found peacefully in the chair beside his cold forge, a half-finished gate hinge still resting on the anvil. The town mourned a humble craftsman they believed had lived paycheck to paycheck his entire life. A man who drove a truck older than hit was Daniel, who found the ledger tucked inside a fireproof box in the back room, alongside 61 years of statements documenting a single unbroken habit. $3,100,000, built 20 and 30, and sometimes only $5 at a time. Through 4 separate market collapses, 2 wars, and a lifetime of never once explaining himself to anyone who didn't ask, his own grandchildren, and never once took a vacation beyond the county fair. The will was simple, just like the man. A portion to Daniel, who wept when he realized his own long-forgotten account had quietly grown into nearly $400,000 entirely on its own. A portion to Priya, enough to buy the forge outright and modernize it without ever taking out a loan. And the largest portion, over $1,800,000, established as the Otto Reinhardt Memorial Trade Scholarship, funding tuition for any young person in the county who wanted to learn a trade with their hands but couldn't afford the training. At the scholarship's first ceremony that autumn, folding chairs were set up in rows across the gravel lot where delivery trucks used to park, and half the town turned out, still trading theories about how a man who drove a truck with 300,000 miles on it could possibly have left behind so much. Priya stood at the podium in front of the same forge where she'd once swept floors for spare change, now bearing a freshly painted sign that read, Reinhardt and Kesler Forge. She held up an old cigar box, the very one Otto had shown Walter more than half a century earlier, its corners soft and rounded from decades of handling. Inside was a single laminated card in Walter's careful, blocky handwriting, the same hand that had once shaped horseshoes and hinges. It read simply, small amounts, every month, for a very long time. That is the whole secret. Everything else is just waiting. Daniel stood near the back in a suit that cost more than his father had spent on clothing in a decade, no longer embarrassed by the mended coat he remembered from childhood, only sorry he had not asked more questions while there was still time. Beside him stood the first scholarship recipient, a 17-year-old welder's apprentice from 2 towns over, clutching an axe. The crowd was quiet for a long moment, the kind of quiet that settles over people doing arithmetic on their own choices, counting back through their own missed Fridays and unopened accounts. Then they applauded, not for the money itself, but for the patience it had taken to build it. 1 horseshoe, 1 deposit, and 1 ordinary Tuesday at a time, for 61 years, in a town that never once knew what it had. Septon's letter she had read so many times the folds were beginning to tear.